friend. Welcome to the Mamahood After Trauma podcast. I'm your host, Emily Cleghorn. This podcast is for mamas navigating childhood trauma while also walking through mamahood. Together, we will empower each other to connect with who we were created to be versus who we were told to be in our trauma. I'm so excited that you've decided to take some time out of your day to join me and tune in. I hope you find this podcast uplifting and empowering. Let's get to it. I'm so excited to be welcoming Rach to join me today. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, it's so nice to have you. Let's get started with you just sharing a little bit of your story, and where trauma fits in the mix of all of this.
Well, there's been many traumatic events in my life. But more so since 2014, I think is where we've where my story kind of really hits the big trauma peaks. 4 children in total now, and my eldest is 24. My second daughter is to my current husband, and she's 17. And then when we hit our 40s, we decided to go back for just one more. And ended up with our gorgeous son, who is now 5.5. I was supposed to have a nice planned cesarean. I'd had that with my second. I did natural birth with the first and went, I just no. And then when the second one was breech, and they said, oh, we really think you should have a cesarean. I'm like, oh, okay, yes. Yay. And that wasn't so bad. Actually, I'm like, this is good. I can cope with this. You turn up, have all the stuff, and it's like, have a baby on the day, and you go back and have lots of painkillers, and then you just move through the process. Cool. I can do that. That's not how it rolled with Jax. I had a lot of pains getting up through Christmas. So he wasn't due till the end of January, and through Christmas I had these what looked like a contraction that lasted for like 30 minutes.
Oh, dear.
Some between 10 to 30 minutes. Yeah, I had to breathe through them. Like, it was pretty significant. I'm like, this is not normal. Not normal. So long story short, it ended up being a placenta abruption.
Oh, dear.
But it wasn't caught. And after the third trip into hospital and being sent home again, I basically got on my knees and prayed to the universe and to God and to everything, and went, right, something needs to happen, because I know he needs to get out. I know there's something wrong. Nobody's listening to me because they can't see any major signs. Do something. Something has to change so they get him out. And this is after we got back from the hospital at 1:30 in the morning. 3 o'clock, my waters broke and there was blood all through it. And I'm like, my first thought was, okay, well, they can't turn me away now. Never mind all the blood. They can't turn me away now. Right. Hubby goes, have I got enough time to have a shower? Sure. So we get to the hospital. I'm like, okay, waters are broken. Let's get into the cesarean. Let's get him out. And they're like, oh, let's give you some endone and see if we can't stall the labour. I'm like, what? No. I'm not supposed to be labouring. Like, I'm not supposed to do labour. Are you not getting the memos? Like, come on, let's go. Anyway, they let me labour. And then 5 hours later, when they were really starting to prep me for getting ready for the cesarean, his heart rate dropped. And my waters had already broken, but apparently there's 2 lots of waters. They had to break the waters again to get to his head to put a monitor on. And when they did, there was blood all through the waters, because they didn't believe me when I came in and said there was a lot of blood, but I wasn't bleeding at the time. So they didn't go, oh, all hands on deck. And so I was in and out of contractions at this point, and I went into one. And then when I came to, the room was full of people, and that's when they said, oh, we need to put the monitor on. Mm-hmm. And then when I went under another one and came out, everybody was gone. They'd all rushed down to the mm-hmm. theatre and left hubby and a nurse to get me in the bed, like with the bed, all the way down to theatre. And I knew at that point I was going under a general, but they didn't know that yet. So they were getting hubby into scrubs and stuff. But I know the rules here are, if it's a spinal block, hubby can come in, but if it's general, he can't. So the hardest part for me around that was, I was feeling okay about it all, or maybe it was the adrenaline. But in the meantime, hubby had seen them press the buttons to go call everybody in, and then everybody's like, when all the blood showed up and everybody's gone, right, we need to get to the theatre now. Now, we were living in Gosford. We didn't have any family there. We were nearly 4 weeks early. This was not the plan. He was all alone. And I knew at that point he was going to be sitting outside that theatre, and it was going to be the longest wait of his life. He had tears streaming down his face. And he said, I'm trying so hard to be a rock for you. And I'm like, I know, and thank you. And just trust me. We are going to be fine. I just knew we were going to be fine, but I trusted that, but I couldn't give him that trust. And that, out of everything that happened, that's probably the most traumatic part for me for some reason, is to see him in such pain and knowing how much hell he was going to go through, and I couldn't do anything about it. So they got me in there, got me under, and they brought Jax out to him and said, okay, Jax is good, he's okay, but they didn't say anything about me initially. I had to come back in and sort, keep me going or whatever was happening. And eventually they did, and when I came to, so it was 8:40, I was born at 8:40 in the morning. Every time I came to, all the way through the afternoon, they just kept telling me to go back to sleep. I'd lost so much blood because everything went so pear-shaped that they needed me to recover some of that as quickly as I could. It was borderline transfusion. So, so I didn't even meet him. They had to wheel my bed into him because he ended up in special care nursery for 3.5 days because he couldn't regulate his blood sugars. And so they wheeled my bed into him, and I met him for the first time that night at 8:30, so nearly 12 hours later. And both of us, there's a photo of both of us, and we both got like drips and things attached to us. He's got the little splints on his hands, and he's laying on me and I'm laying in bed. I'm like, both of us like, oh, we made it. We made it. We survived. It's the kind of look that it looks like. And so it was hard. And moving on from that, there was a lot of damage that was done because I had to get him out fast for me physically. And the trauma, the birth, there was a lot of birth trauma. Weirdly, I felt like I had betrayed my body because once my waters had broken, it went hard and fast to try and get him out. And then we just cut into it to get him out. So there was this weird grief and sadness and frustration and anger that came with, stopping the body from doing what it was already going to do, and shortcutting that. But the physical stuff was the hardest. With my second one, she cesarean. Hey, at 6 weeks, I was driving the car. I was back to normal. I was chomping at the bit to get out. With Jackson, I was still sleeping in the recliner at 4 months down, because I couldn't lay on my sides. I had a cyst that stayed in the wound until 12 months going. The right side's all jagged. They clearly had to get in and get him out fast because they were worried about him. From what we can tell, he was okay. Like his APGAR scores. He got a cough. His APGAR scores. Yeah, his APGAR scores were actually fine. So I didn't show any major trauma for him. And that was something we found out, on the day and whatnot. And found out later it was a placenta abruption that was happening behind it. So that's why they couldn't see it. There was no major alerts for them to go in any sooner. But yeah, there was definitely a lot of PTSD from that whole event, which I was processing for months and months and months. On top of trying to breastfeed him was a nightmare. I ended up with mastitis twice. He wasn't sucking properly. We didn't know that at the time. But there were just, giving up the breastfeeding when he was only, 4 weeks old because I'd had another round of antibiotics, and I'm like, I just can't give him the antibiotics, and all the things, like not sleeping, the birth, it just was so hard. And it still took me months to, like, even then I'm still processing some of it to some degree. So that was fine. And then when he got older, we started to notice a few things. So when he was between 6 months and 12 months, we noticed that he doesn't really look at us. And he didn't really laugh or smile. He did little bits here and there, but it wasn't a regular thing. He didn't respond to his name, which is not unusual at 6 months, but as he got older, he still wasn't responding to his name. He was fascinated with his hands and feet, and he'd do these funky little quirky things in front of his eyes, and he had a lot of quirks,
Mm-hmm.
And as a parent, you're like, oh, that's different. That's really cool, actually. He's kind of quirky. So, you just roll with it. Anyway, we got to 13, 14 months, and we were at we'd had to go to a funeral, and all my family were there. And it was my aunts who had spent a lot of time working with autistic children and disabilities and whatnot. And they picked up the signs even probably earlier than that, but they didn't feel like they could come out and tell me that they felt he was autistic. So they got my cousin, who they knew I had a good relationship with, to come and have a chat to me. And to some degree, I kind of knew. But after that, when we were driving home, I went and looked up all of the red flags, and he ticked every single one of them, like, okay, all right. So we went through the process of diagnosis, and the diagnosis came back as ASD level 3, which is the most, needs the most help. And he was completely nonverbal and had a global development delay. And now he's 5.5, and what we know now is he also has an intellectual delay. So intellectual disability, intellectual delay, there's so many different terms for it. And he's got irritable bowel. He's had so many digestive issues over his life that have landed us in and out of hospital. And the worst of it being hell yeah. So all of that trauma. And then we had hell yeah. So we just had Corey, who was not expected, but she was showing signs of being very neurotypical. So I'm like, okay, she hugs, she does all the things that I was looking forward to having with Jax. And but so I thought, okay, well, maybe this is the universe or God's way of going, okay, well, you're really looking forward to a really cuddly and spontaneous and fun little child, and Jax wasn't kind of all of those things. He was very special, but he wasn't the huggy type. He didn't like to be hugged. So I had to grieve that. And then Corey comes through, and she is a hugger, she is a clinger. Like, oh, okay, right, thanks. I see what you did there. So then what happened was hell yeah. And that was from March 2019 to March 2020. And it started off where Jack's got an ear infection, and I gave him some antibiotics. And with him, I've known all along, I have to do as much natural with him as possible, because he just reacts. He's had these spells where he wakes up in the middle of the night screaming in absolute agony. So we've changed his diet. He was already gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, chemical-free, fruit-free. I mean, this kid's on very limited diet, but very, very clean and all organic. He eats all organic. The rest of the house doesn't necessarily get to eat all organic, but he does. So I knew that it wasn't a good idea, but I went against it because everybody around me was saying, well, he's in pain, you need to get it fixed sooner than later. So I relented and gave him antibiotics, but I gave him 3 doses. And after that, he was worse. Every mama instinct in me said, don't, just go back to the natural protocol. So I went back to the natural protocol, I beefed it up, added a few things, made it a bit more potent. And then every week I would take him back to the doctors to get him his ear checked to see if they were getting any better, because he was still waking up in the middle of the night screaming in pain. And his ears got better. It wasn't his ears anymore. So I'm like, okay, well, we had to give him antibiotics, so we'll start on the gut healing stuff. So we started on gut healing. We saw a pediatrician who really focuses on that with autism, found out what other stuff we could give him, started that. And we thought, okay, well, it's just going to be a matter of time. We're just going to have to ride it out until it gets better. It didn't get better. It just didn't get better. So hubby and I were doing night shift, split shift. So hubby would do the first shift and he would drive, because we put him in the car. We found for him, because of his sensory issues, being in the car was the safest place, because he would bang his head. He would bang his head so hard on everything because he was in pain. So we, in the car seat, at least it's padded. At least he's locked in. Plus, when you've got a child screaming in the house, nobody can sleep. So, and this was happening multiple times a night. And if he wasn't in pain, he would then be wide awake for hours. And he does screechy sounds, which is lovely. I love his happy screechy sounds. But at 2, 3, 4 a.m., you kind of get a little bit over it. So if he wasn't in pain, he was wired. Eventually, we found something for the wired. It's magnesium. So magnesium baths every night, got rid of the wired, which would mean he would go back to sleep once the pain was over. But he would sleep better sitting up. So we'd take it in turns. And the rule was when the second coffee gives out, so coffee at nighttime, second coffee gives out, you have to tap the other one in. So he might start at the first shift and then get up or tack me in anywhere from about 11 p.m. through to 3, 4, 5 a.m. Very rarely did I get a full night's sleep even in that, because if Jax and Kerry were out driving, guaranteed Corey was awake. So at all angles, I had them both tag teaming to keep me up, keep me awake. And I don't sleep. I'm the light sleeper in the house. So this went on for 12 months. And we just got more and more burnt out. We were a Groundhog Day. We were literally, and this is when COVID hit. So for us, thank God for COVID. Terrible that everything else happened for everyone else. But for us, what happened was everybody was sent home to work from home. Hubby at the time was working in Sydney, which meant an hour and 45 commute each way.
Oh, man. Which
would make it a 12-hour day for him. So 12-hour day on top of getting only maybe 2-3 hours sleep, maybe 5 or 6 if he's super lucky, and then have to do a full day and then come home on the train and then get straight back into the mix. It just would have been killer. At least this way, he could sleep through to 7:29, crawl out of bed, go to the computer, log on, and be seen as being at work at 7:30. You take whatever you can get. And we were lucky enough to have some disability funding to have someone else in the house help me with the children during the day, because it was just me otherwise. And if I hadn't had that, I would have ended up in hospital, because that was the only way I could get some downtime, was to have someone else take care of one or the other. And because they were both so young, 1 and 3, there was I couldn't put them into daycare. We didn't have the funds to put them into daycare. Because I wasn't even able to work through this time. Like, just to say we were burnt out is an understatement. I don't even know what the words are. We were barely functioning, and my body was struggling so badly that, when words don't come, but it's usually a singular word. Just don't have the words not coming. It'd then move into sentences. I'd lose sentences. And as the day wore on, and I was constantly needing to do this, and when you've got kids, it's like, okay, you drag yourself off of the couch, because now that one needs a butt change. Now this one needs something to eat. That one needs something to drink. And now that one needs a butt change. And it's just like, let alone at the time, all of his OT appointments, speech appointments, then going through the process of getting her diagnosed, because she ended up showing signs of not being able to speak either. So all of the assessments, all of the appointments, there was appointments every week, multiple of them, dragging my ass off the couch to take one to the appointment because I couldn't take the two, have someone else with the other one, come back from there, deal with the other one. So even though I had somebody else in the house, it was nonstop. It was absolutely nonstop. And then our now 17-year-old, who was like 15, 16 at the time, she would go to school and she'd come home and I'd be like handing her the baby to go, right, can you take her? I'm just going to go, I have to lay down. I have to just close my eyes, even just for half an hour. I just need out. So on bad days, I would lose the ability to speak. It's like there was no words entering my mind. It wasn't just that I couldn't get my mouth to move, like the information wasn't coming into my head for the mouth to move. There was nothing. And then on extreme days, I would lose the ability to understand what people were saying to me. I'd be standing in the kitchen with tears streaming down my face because I couldn't even tell them what I needed. I didn't even know what I needed. I couldn't, and there was no words. And people were talking to me and I couldn't understand what they were saying. At that point, hubby would go, bed. He'd send me to bed. He would organise for our daughter to take care of the child, and between them they would take care of the other two, And even though they were already burnt out, but I was the one falling off the edge. And that's how we had to roll with it. Whoever was literally falling off the edge would be the one that got to go to bed or check out for a bit. And then everybody else would then have to rally to keep the house going and the kids what they need. In the middle of that, Corey, our littlest, was having these rages. So not only were we driving Jax multiple times at night because he was having these massive pain episodes that nobody knew what they were, she was having these rages. And you've got a 2-year-old meltdown, which is kind of this level here. Everybody can deal with it. I've had 2 kids before. I can deal with the tantrums and all of that stuff. But no, she was having an autistic meltdown on top of that. So she couldn't stand your voice, couldn't stand to be touched, couldn't stand it. Just, everything's like turned up, and it hurt, and she would scream. But then she would boil over into a rage where she would think about if you were to try and put a feral cat into a bathtub of water, that was her. So the second you touched her, she'd go at you. She would try to gouge my eyes out, rip my earrings out, scratch me, bite me, punch me, kick me, just full on. But she would do it to herself too. So I'd have to touch her to stop her from hurting herself, and then I would have to be the punching bag. And she would scream, like full on fight, scream, all of that for 45 minutes straight. Like 2 minutes, 5 minutes, hey, the kids get over it, 5 to 10 minutes, 15 minutes. No. Rage? No. It's so hard to see your little 1-2-year-old who is so angry and so upset that she cannot contain it. She's got absolutely no control over any of it. And it'd take me between an hour to 2 hours to get her to the other side of that rage. Where on the other side of that, she would allow me to pick her up. And then she would just crumble into my arms because she's so physically, emotionally, and mentally exhausted. And she would fall asleep. Or she would just lay there and just be so, so quiet until she could get up. So it got to the point where I was driving Jack. We were in the car with Jax 80% of the 24-hour day. And if I wasn't driving Jax, I was getting Corey through a rage. And hubby and I were not even, we were ships in the night, we were islands, both of us feeling so disconnected and so alone, yet we were both in the mix because we couldn't even, we had no awareness of where, like you stop doing the little things where you put a hand on a shoulder or, hey, honey, how are you going? Like it's just, you get into such a level of survivalist. What's the next thing I absolutely have to do and nothing more? And what are the words I absolutely need to use to say I need help and nothing more? So pleases, thank yous, some of that dropped away. And when you're not getting the pleases and thank yous and you're not getting the hi, how you going, or the touch on the shoulder or the hug here and there, you start to feel extremely disconnected. Like for me, I was like, where is he? Why is he not here? What's going on with him? And not realizing that he's in the same place I am. I wasn't doing any of the things that I wanted him to do for me because I didn't have the capacity. I was so tapped out and so burnt out and had so much, like beyond nothing to give other than what I absolutely had to. And he was in the exact same boat. So that's how it was for a year. Eventually, when we decided to move up here to Queensland and we switched, like we were in and out of hospitals trying to get answers. People kept turning us away saying, wait till you see an ex-pediatrician appointment, which would be 3-6 months down the track. So it turned out that when we'd given him the antibiotics, that it had stripped his gut, and then he was sensitive to FODMAP foods, and it was the FODMAP foods that were continuing the cycle. He literally had so much inflammation through his digestive system, this poor kid. So we took them out, and once we took them out, within 2 days, he slept. He slept.
Wow.
You know, and all the things that everybody kept telling me, oh, well, him going to the car is just a behavioural issue. Now he's gotten used to it. Now it's a pattern. I'm like, no, he won't go if it's not in pain. I'm telling you, it's pain. They didn't even believe me. They said, oh, we think it's just his autism. No, it's not. It's not fucking his autism. It's pain. I'm telling you, it's pain. I know it's pain. So to be not believed, you know, all of that is a compounding PTSD. Not even knowing that was a thing. And eventually we found out that for Corey, it was salicylates and amines, that her body can't process them, and how that shows up is this high level sensitivity moving into complete rages. When we took all of that out, the rages stopped. So that finished a year ago, and it's taken us 18 months to rebuild our relationship, to rebuild our health, to rebuild our family, to get to a place where only just now we're starting to feel like we're stepping into thriving and no longer in survival. But it has been a huge process to get from that to here.
So what would you say to a mama who is in the thick of it right now? What is one thing that she can do to lift herself up?
So there are a few things, and I guess it's not even really one thing. It's a bunch of little things that make the difference, because I know that in the thick of it, I didn't even have the resources to reach out.
No.
I didn't even have the resources to think, oh, I should do that for myself. I'm like, if I got any moment, it was bed. So do whatever you have to do to survive through this part, knowing that, and keep remembering it is only temporary no matter how long it goes. It will not last like this forever. And if you can just take 5 minutes, even 30 seconds, where you just stop and breathe, where you relax your body and just breathe. It's these little things that take a little bit of the stress away, because it's going to be thinking about this phase as it's a bit of a marathon. What can you do every day that'll just help you to keep going a bit longer? For us, we were able to organise someone to come into the home and just be with the kids, so him and I could just get out even for an hour. And that was date night, and that might have been an hour in 3 months. Like we really didn't get much, and even if we did, both of us just wanted to sleep, and sometimes that was it. Sometimes the only thing you can do is get that time to lock yourself in your bedroom and you just shut your eyes, or binge watch something for a couple of hours where you can just escape. While they all say, oh, it's not a good idea and you should be thinking, doing all this stuff, it's like, when you've got no capacity, you've got no capacity. And any mama that's out there in that right now, I feel for you, and I just want you to know it won't last forever. And if you can just take any moment you can to stop and breathe, it'll be the one thing that can help you to get through. And then you just keep going. You keep searching for the answers. You keep fighting for that child. You keep knowing that there is a way through this. There is a way to make it different. That's what kept me going. I'm like, this is not how my life is going to stay. What can I do? And I did it. I did it as much as I could. I also called in as much support as I could.
Yes, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Don't be afraid to ask for help. I had best friends coming to stay with me, offering to take the kids so I could sleep, taking me out. Even at one point, one of my friends that lived up the road, she said, well, how would you come stay here for a night? So then we started implementing. I'd stay at her place for a night to just get a one night's sleep. And then, a couple of nights, that's every second week, hubby would get one night where he'd go and stay at a friend's place and just defrag. One night's sleep. So it's thinking outside the box. How can you, if you think this is going to, you almost like to plan like this is going to be for a long time, but keep the optimism that it's only going to be a short time.
It's only a season.
It's only a season. It is only a season. And me on the other side of that, I mean, this is why we call it hell year, because now everything compares to that. It's like, well, we've just been in hospital with my son who ended up with pneumonia, which has its own traumas attached to it. But not as bad as hell year. Not as bad as hell year. So it does get better, and it does take a lot to move from the survival mode back into thriving. And it's so, so, so important, ridiculously critical, that any kind of self-care you can do, any kind of self-care is good. And I know that through that time, that if I'm really honest, I went without a shower for about 1 to 2 months at a time.
Oh, wow.
I would just roll out of bed and get dressed because it was my turn to drive. So then I'd be dressed. So then I would stay dressed because then I'd get back from driving him all night, often just after dawn. And then I'd be into, okay, making him a coffee. And then, okay, now he needs breakfast and now she needs this. And now that's just how it rolled. So, I stopped brushing my teeth. I stopped washing my hair. All of these things stopped because we were in massive survival mode. Mm-hmm. So when he started to sleep, I had to relearn or re-pattern that in. Mm-hmm. So as whatever the reason the survival mode is in, when it stops, you have to consciously choose to start doing more self-care. That is your time to indulge in self-care before you overload your plate. Mm-hmm. It's like, if you think about it as a pendulum, when you are so far burnt out, you've got to do so much more rest, as much rest as you can to get back to some kind of normal. And it's okay to say no to people. It's okay to say, no, I don't have capacity to do that today. It's okay to cancel, reschedule if you need to. I've certainly learned I've had to do that. It is absolutely okay to put your needs first wherever you can. Through this, beyond this, just do whatever it takes to get what you need as much as you can through this, knowing that you won't get everything you need right now, but you will.
Yes, you will. If a listener wants to connect with you further, how can they go about doing that?
Yep. So I'm now a relationship coach for couples like me, helping people to thrive as an individual and thrive as a couple so they can thrive as a family. You can find me on my website, which is divinerelating.com, divinerelating.com. And I've even got a relationship survival guide for couples who've got autistic or special needs kids, but really, if you've got high intensity kids or periods like this, it's kind of all the same. So you can get that guide for free. Plus you can get the 5 most potent phrases that will dissolve and de-escalate any conflict. You can get that too for free on the website. But that's the best way to contact me. And I'd love to be able to help anybody who's trying to keep their relationship together, to get through these hard times, but build a relationship that's resilient enough to do that and thrive and get back to thriving. I think we all deserve to be thriving, individuals as well as a relationship.
Yes, I agree. So I will include a link to Rach's website in the show notes of this episode. So you can click the See More button in the description and it will send you over to my website, which will have the link to Rach's website right there for you to click. Thank you so much for joining me today, Rach. It has been a pleasure talking with you and hearing your story. You are one powerhouse mama, and it has been a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Emily, and I really appreciate that you've got this show, and the good that it does to hear other people's stories and know that you can get through this too. You can rise absolutely through any challenge. As you've heard from my story, I've had to rise a number of times. You can do it. You will rise again too.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Mamahood After Trauma podcast. If you resonated with what you heard, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and share it with a friend who would also benefit, because we rise together. Until next time, Mama, keep shining.